everybody, I'm Natalie with Missouri Star Quilt Company, and today's video is What If Prairie Flower. Prairie Flower is one of my favorite quilts, so let's get started. All right, so today's quilt is really fun. The original Prairie Flower block looks very similar to this one, but you'll notice on this quilt, we've set our blocks on point. We have a dark background. We still have our similar cornerstone and sashing, but if you remember the original, it was set straight with the traditional cornerstone and sashing. And so this one just gives it a very different feel. We've also used just 3 fabrics as opposed to a pre-cut that had lots of different scrappy fabrics in it, and a darker background as opposed to the white background. So I find it just so fascinating how different quilts can be with just minor changes. So let's go ahead and get started, and I will tell you what we need to make this quilt. All right, so to make this quilt, you're gonna need 2 yards of a dark value fabric, and that is our background here in the middle and all of our 2.5-inch squares. You're gonna need a medium value fabric, about 1.5 yards, and then a light value fabric is 1 5/8. And then for your background, which includes your sashing and your setting triangles and your border, you're gonna need 4 yards of fabric. So then for your backing, you'll need 5 3/4 yards, and we've actually used the same fabric on our back that we used for our border and setting triangles, and I just think it's absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorites, and I think it turned out really nice on this quilt. So all of the fabrics in this quilt are from the Kaffe Classics Title Color Story by Kaffe Fassett for Free Spirit Fabrics. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is the block, and all of the pieces in the block are made from 5-inch squares and 2.5-inch squares. So that is what we're gonna cut all of our fabric into. So we're gonna start with our background, or the dark fabric. That is gonna be, all of our snowballed corners are made using the 2.5-inch squares from this, and then these two are just 5-inch squares. So we'll get all of that cut, and we're gonna start with a 2.5 that we'll subcut into 2.5-inch squares, and a 5-inch strip that we will subcut into 5-inch squares. So it comes together pretty easily. I think that's the reason that I love it so much, because it is just so simple, and it also makes such a stunning quilt. We did a block version that has a panel in the middle that I think is also really cool. So you'll have to check that out. All right, I'm just gonna subcut these. This ruler is so great for cutting 5-inch squares because it's just the right width, and you just don't even have to think. Oh, and that worked out perfect. Excellent. All right, so these are ready. I'm gonna press that fold out just to make it easy to use, and then I'm gonna cut some 2.5-inch squares off of this strip. Because we're snowballing everything, you may want to mark a line diagonally across the back of your squares, or you can use your diagonal seam tape, or you can press a line, or just eyeball it, whatever feels good to you. I know when you do this a lot, sometimes it just feels like you're on autopilot and you don't really need that line anymore. But it does help with precision. So, all right, I think that one's a little short. Yep, that goes in the scrap bin. Okay, I've got my other fabrics cut already. So what we're gonna do, one of these fabrics is gonna make up our middle, and so this one just gets placed right in the center. And then we are gonna have 4 of our mediums and 4 of our lights. So for the medium fabrics, we're going to snowball just the top to create the little point. And so I've got lines drawn on these. These squares are going to line up point to point in the middle. And because it's 2.5 on 5, they lay down really nicely. You can do that seam all at once. And you don't have to move the fabric. It's super easy. So let me show you how I did that. I get all of these ready. Hang on, I don't need this guy. He's extra, and I have a, there we go. It felt sometimes, okay, I don't know if anybody else has made this mistake, but multiple times in my life as a quilter, I have accidentally sewn a seam on 2 pieces of fabric, and that's just, it's funny but frustrating. So I see you if that's happened to you. I understand. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna sew on this line, and I'm gonna start here and go up, and then I'm gonna pivot and go down. And we'll do that for both of these blocks because, you know, I've got a couple already done. Okay. And then just flipping it around here and continuing. It just makes it go really fast. Alrighty. And also, you know, because this quilt is just made with these colors, it would be really easy to go ahead and chain piece all of these. It'll come together so quick. Alrighty. So now I'm just going to take my scissors. I'm going to trim this off. You can use your rotary cutter as well. Just about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. And I've got one more done here of these guys. This guy, here he is. Okay, now we're going to set the seam and just roll them back gently. We don't want to push or stretch that fabric, we just want to press it. But we also want to make sure it goes back all the way and you don't end up with like a little fold there. Okay. And I've got this last one right here and ready to go. So these line up just like this, center out or points out. I know we've done some variations on the prairie flowers, so I don't know if you noticed, but if you turn them in, you make a little star, which is also fun, but that's for another day. All right. So we've got all of those done. So now we're going to do our corners, and our corners are just your classic XO blocks. So we're going to put these squares on opposite corners, just like that. We'll line that out. We're going to sew on the line on both sides. Now this one I will just do the 2 sides, and then I'll flip the whole thing around and do the other side. Just because that makes sense to me. All right, get that nice and lined up. And then I clip my little threads. Trim this off again just at the 1/4 inch, and I'll do these with the ruler and rotary cutter so you can see how that's done. I just line that up and give myself 1/4 of an inch against the seam line. I'll do one more here. And I've got one more here ready to go for trimming. I'm telling you, this block comes together so fast. All right, we're gonna set our seams and then roll these pieces back. And they come out nice and square typically, although if you're concerned, you can double check to make sure that they stay 5 inches. So we're not doing squaring here like you would do with a normal, you know, half square triangle. So that saves us a bunch of time. No squaring is great. All right, now these are gonna go in with our color to the middle, and our snowballs meet up here on the corners. And that's it, that's your whole block. So we'll stitch this together just in your, you know, your normal 9-patch method of stitching together a block. And then let's talk about how this is laid out, because all of the blocks are identical. They're made just like this. It's very quick and easy and straightforward, but the setting here is on point. So we're gonna go into, you know, setting these up like this. You're gonna cut some corners and some setting triangles. Your sashings are the length of your block. So you're gonna wanna measure your block, and ours measures 14 inches unfinished. So that is the length that you're gonna cut your sashing strips. All of your cornerstones, again, are 2.5 inches square. And so you're gonna start with this upper triangle being attached to this block, and you'll have your sashing and cornerstones attached to it as well. And then we're gonna sew this together in these long diagonal rows. So let's talk about our setting triangles. So these are gonna start out at 23.25 inch square. You're gonna cut them in half both directions diagonally, and you'll do that to 3 squares, and that'll give you plenty to do all the outside edge setting triangles. And then the ones in the corner are a little bit different. They're 11 7/8, and you cut them in half once. You'll do that to 2 squares, and that'll give you all 4 for setting the corners of this quilt. Now, it comes together really nicely. I just love it. The machine quilting pattern here is called Diamond Loops, and you can see it really nicely on this backing. It's one of our more modern and new patterns, and I just love it. I think it's so elegant and also fancy and fun. This quilt ends up being 72.25 by 94.5, and I love it. I think it's a great way to make the Prairie Flower quilt just look a little more special. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on the What If Prairie Flower from the Missouri Star Quilt Company. Hi everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's video. We're trying super hard to get to 1 million subscribers, so if you enjoyed it and you want to see more, just hit subscribe and share with your friends and encourage them to do the same, and I will see you next Friday with a brand new tutorial.